الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على الأتمان الأكملان على خاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ما بعد, فإنشاءالlah we'll continue with reading from the book known as شرح اصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة, the explanation of the fundamentals of the aqidah of أهل السنة والجماعة by Al-Imam Abil Qasim Hibatullah ibn al-Hasan ibn Mansur al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 418 after the Hijrah. And we're still in that chapter, سياق ما ورد في ثواب من حفظ السنة وأحياها ودعا إليها. The context or the narrations regarding the reward of those individuals who preserve the Sunnah and revive the Sunnah and call to the Sunnah. And the author is just mentioning some of the reward that Allah has in store for these people, benefits that come to them in this life as well as the next. Just as he is mentioning in this chapter, familiarizing us in this chapter with some of the individuals who are known for this. Some of the individuals who are known for these qualities of preserving the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah, and calling the Sunnah, in order that we might recognize them and their virtue and their value and appreciate their statements that much more when they make them. And we're now at a narration where the author rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وأخبرنا أحمد بن عبيد قال أنبأنا محمد بن الحسين قال حدثنا أحمد بن زهير قال أنبأنا يعقوب بن كعب قال حدثنا عبدة صاحب بن المبارك قال حدثني ابن المبارك عن سفيان الثوري أنه قال استوصوا بأهل السنة خيرا فإنهم غرباء. He says that Ahmed ibn Ubaid, he informed us, he said that Muhammad ibn al-Hussein informed us, he said that Ahmed ibn Zuhair narrated to us. A subtle benefit here, if you've been paying attention, when he gets to this individual Ahmed, sometimes he calls him Ahmed ibn Zuhair, sometimes he calls him Ahmed ibn Abi Khaythama, sometimes he calls him Abu Bakr ibn Abi Khaythama. And all of this is what they call, like, it's a type of tadlis, like saying the name of your teacher multiple different ways, which gives the impression of an abundance of teachers. And this is something that the Salaf, they used to do, right? They would mention their teacher with a multitude of different identifiers. Not lying, because the one person is known by all of these things, but they would do it for a reason. And a lot of times the reason would be, yani al-inshaq, right? To get you vigorous and active. Saying the same name over and over again can lead to a monotony. And so they would mention their teacher with various different identifiers. Sometimes they use their kunya, sometimes they use their parents' kunya, sometimes they use their nickname, things like this to vary the way they address them or mention them to get the student active in, looking at the biographies and in saying these different names. And so this is an example of it here. He says Ahmed ibn Zuhair, who is Ahmed ibn Zuhair ibn Harb, or Abu Bakr ibn Abi Khaythama, who is a famous scholar, the son of a famous scholar in his own right. And so that's just a subtle benefit that's in the isnad. When you're reading these names, you kind of pay attention to small things like that, and they're like little tidbits in the isnad that a student, recognizes and enjoys as he's reading, to get him, to keep his, thought juices flowing, etc. So anyway, he says that Ahmed ibn Zuhair narrated to us. He said that Yaqub ibn Ka'b, he informed us. He said that Abda, the companion of Ibn al-Mubarak, narrated to us. He said that Ibn al-Mubarak narrated to me on the authority of Sufyan al-Thawri. Sufyan al-Thawri, he said I advise you with goodness towards the people of the Sunnah, or be good to the people of the Sunnah, because they are strangers. This statement is a statement that is necessary for us, ya ma'shara as-salafiyyin. This statement is necessary for us to adopt and to make from our fundamentals in this day and age. Istawsu bi ahli sunnati khayra. He advised us, a wasiyah, right? And upon us is to accept his advice. Istawsu bi ahli sunnati khayra. Be good with the people of the Sunnah. Treat the people of the Sunnah with goodness, with kindness. As our Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbar, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he had his book that he mentioned, Rifkan Ahl Sunnah bi Ahl Sunnah, right? Be compassionate with the people of the Sunnah, O people of the Sunnah. And from the things that were, strange is how people would criticize this work of Sheikh Abdul Muhsin, hafidhahullah ta'ala, when in reality it is a important lesson for the Muslim to learn. And this is the statement of Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala, saying a similar statement, Istawsu bi ahli sunnati khayra. Treat the people of the Sunnah good, right? Interact in ways that are good and that build love and compassion and friendship and camaraderie. Be good to each other, right? Don't constantly seek to tear each other down or to muddy the waters or to weaken the relationships. Be the changes that you want to see in others and build the bridges that you want others to travel over. If we don't start with ourselves and how we act with ourselves, then why do we ever think that we will be better? Very often people, they get frustrated with their brother or their sister in certain circumstances and things that a lot of times, while they might attribute it to matters of religion, very often might go and in reality be matters of the dunya. Personal quarrels or qualms that they have with each other, ways that they were treated or interacted with each other. And, sometimes it can be religion as well. Sometimes it's not to say that there's no people who make mistakes from amongst us, and there are no people who actually end up deviating from amongst us. Wa'yadhu billah. But the point is that the foundation should always be built upon this principle of istawsu bi ahli sunnati khayra. As Sufyan al-Thawri said, treat the people, I advise you to treat the people of the Sunnah good. And the reason for this, he goes on, he explains, فَإِنَّهُمْ غُرَبَاء. Because the people of the Sunnah are strangers, right? Meaning they are individuals who are in a strange land. This earth in its totality, for the person of the Sunnah, is a strange land. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib aw abir as-sabil." Be in this dunya as if you are a stranger or one who is traversing a path. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Bada al-Islamu ghariba wa sayaudu ghariba fatuba lil-ghuraba." He said that Islam began as something strange and it will return to being something strange. So blessed are the strangers. And so if we are strangers in this land, it doesn't make sense that when we see someone that we recognize, when we see somebody from our relatives, from our close family, traveling the same path as us, trying to get to the same destination as us, that we abandon them and act as if we didn't see them. Or even worse, we throw things in the path that hinder them. If we were traveling on a highway and we saw our family, how many of us, if you see a car of a friend of yours while you're driving down the street, right? Especially in a place where you didn't expect to see them. You were just out and about doing shopping, and all of a sudden you see a friend of yours leaving the grocery store that you're on your way to? Do you beep your horn? Do you flash your lights? Do you wave your hand? And if this is the case in things that we do in this dunya, then how should we be in the affair of our deen? When I see a family member of mine from the people of Sunnah, am I trying to do things that will allow us to travel together on this path, to remove some of the obstacles that might hinder each other, to have good companionship and maybe make the trip a little quicker because we're able to have these good conversations, right? There's nothing worse than a car ride when you're mad at somebody, right? How long does that car ride feel like? But instead, I'm trying to build bridges and build relationships, cut the tension, and make a good environment for myself and for my brother or my sister in order that we can both get to paradise. Because we know that on this trip, we are strangers. And not only are we strangers, but we are strangers in enemy lands. Not only are we strangers here, but we are strangers behind enemy lines. And how does it look for us to abandon our brother or our sister behind? And I know sometimes these examples can get, stretched thin, but how often is this the case where we, because of our actions, because of how we conduct ourselves, push so many people away from us, and then those people end up deviating after we push them away? Brothers and sisters of ours who might have made a mistake, where all it took was a strong, handhold, and a strong, sometimes even maybe a headlock with a brother of yours and say, hey, akhi, nah, that's not the way you do it, with love and with concern. And that might have saved them and saved us. But how many of the times do we go and we get personal vendettas, personal feelings? We get mad at each other, and then that causes a separation. Then we justify our separation by trying to attach it to a religious matter. And then we make this religious matter something that we draw lines of friendship and enmity upon. And then we find that our brother, after being ostracized, vilified, excommunicated in the community, and then we wonder why he ends up with this or that jama'ah. And then even worse than that, you find us boasting after that. Nobody leaves us except that they end up with the Hizbis. Wallahi, hadha laysa, it's not, shouldn't be from our desire. It doesn't bring us pleasure that somebody ends up with the Hizbis. It shouldn't bring us pleasure that somebody who was a Muslim and who was a Salafi and who had good actions that Allah was going to compensate them for reverts to kufr because the brothers talked about him, or because him and the brothers couldn't get along. And then we send out messages. You see what happened to Akh? You see what happened to the brother, right? Nobody talks about this brother except that Allah kicks him out, right? We should be saddened by this, that we lost our Muslim brother who was Salafi because of these type of actions. And so this is something that Sufyan rahimahullah ta'ala is mentioning for us, that we might remember it. Istawsu bi ahli sunnati khayra. I advise you to treat the people of the Sunnah good because they are strangers. Allah advises us with this in the Quran. وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبُوا رِيحُكُمْ, right? Or يَذْهَبُوا رِيحُكُمْ. And don't argue amongst yourselves, and thus you'll end up weak, and your strength or your effect will go away, right? It will vanish. And so this is an example of the statement of Sufyan al-Thawri and some of the benefits in his advice to us. Istawsu bi ahli sunnati khayra fa innahum ghuraba, because indeed they are ghuraba. Allah says in the Quran, wa ati'u Allah wa rasulahu wa la tanaza'u fatafshalu wa tadhhabu rihukum wasbiru inna Allah ma'as sabirin. and obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not argue, i.e. amongst yourselves, fatafshalu, and thus you'll weaken yourselves, and your influence will vanish, and have patience. Indeed, Allah is with those who exercise patience. Right? Be patient with your brother and your sister. واستوصوا بأهل السنة خيرا. اللالكائي رحمه الله تعالى, he says, أخبرنا محمد بن رزق الله قال أنبأنا أحمد بن عثمان ابن يحيى قال حدثنا ابن أبي العوام قال حدثنا ابن أبي العوام قال حدثنا أبو بكر عبد الرحمن بن عثمان الصوفي قال سمعت يوسف ابن أسباط يقول سمعت سفيان الثوري يقول إذا بلغك أن رجل بالمشرق صاحب سنة وآخر بالمغرب فابعث إليهما بالسلام وادعوا لهما ما أقل أهل السنة والجماعة. نعم, كلمة جميلة. Al-Lalaka'i, he says that Muhammad ibn Rizqillah informed us. He said that Ahmad ibn Uthman ibn Yahya informed us. He said that Ibn Abil Awam narrated to us. He said that Abu Bakr Abdul Rahman ibn Uthman as-Sufi narrated to us. He said that I heard Yusuf ibn Asbat saying, I heard Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala, who said, if it reaches you that there is a person of the Sunnah in the East, in the Far East, and there is another one in the Far West, then send salams to the both of them and make dua for the both of them. How few are the people of the Sunnah and their Jama'ah? Ma aqalla ahla sunnati wal Jama'ah. Sufyan al-Thawri says, if it reaches you that there's a person of the Sunnah in the Far East and one in the Far West, then send them the salams. Right? This is once again more advice for these fundamentals. Very often when somebody comes who's not part of our community, not part of our, unfortunate to use this word, clique, sometimes a brother comes from this city or that city. Well, he came from England. He came from, this city or that city in America. He came from this country or that country. Sometimes we might have a default position against them. We might look at them with question. We might look at them with even sometimes contempt and aversion. But Sufyan al-Thawri, he's telling us how we should be acting. If you hear about a person that's on the Sunnah in the Far East, fil Mashriq, and somebody else in the West, فَبْعَثْ إِلَيْهِمَ السَّلَامِ, send salams to the both of them, right? Don't think because somebody's from a different community than yours, after you've heard that this person is on the Sunnah, that you should treat them with aversion and disdain, right? Treat them with welcome, treat them with love, treat them with goodness. Istawsu bi ahli sunnah. And make dua for them. Wallahi, this is something that's small, but you see a lot of times we don't do. We hear about a brother in a city who is doing something, and maybe arrogance overtakes us, or jealousy overtakes us. Or, well, what does he know? Well, who is that brother? What is make dua. Oh, mashallah, Allahumma barak. May Allah put barakah in what they're doing. May Allah increase them in good. May Allah give them strength. May Allah put them on firmness. May Allah accept their efforts. Right? Why do we sometimes always default? Why do we sometimes default to, well, who do they think they are? And who is they? And they haven't, worked with us. And I don't know. Make dua. Right? We don't know everybody. We're not wrapped in with everybody. Akhi, there's a brother in this city. He has a book on narrated usul, mashallah. He graduated from the university. Young brother, mashallah. But, he's out there teaching narrated usul. Oh, mashallah, Allahumma barak. Nasallahu yuthabbita. We ask Allah to make him firm. We ask Allah to give him direction. We ask Allah to make him strong. Right? Give him my salams. Let him know the brothers in St. Louis appreciate what he's doing. Not, well, who is he? Where did he come from? Who is, right? Akhi, make dua for the brother. this is what we need more of. It takes us all working together if we're really going to bring a change in the ummah. So Sufyan al-Thawri, he says, send the both of them salam and make dua for them. How few are the people of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah? How few are we in number? We don't have the numbers to be this harsh on each other. And I use that word, harsh, not critical. We can be critical of each other. We can comment. We can speak about what we think is wrong and what we can do better. But we don't have the numbers to be this harsh to where a brother who is trying his best to be on the Sunnah. And this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about deviants. We're not talking about people who are shot out. We're not talking about people their position is clear. Brothers and sisters who are trying hard to be Salafi. They don't know anything except be Salafi. But maybe they made a mistake. We don't have the numbers to just exclude them. How few are we? Ma aqalla ahl sunnati wal jama'ah. Right? And nor was this the da'ab of the Salaf. Nor was this from the way and the character of the Salaf that they would just exclude people who were on the Sunnah, from the people of the Sunnah. So this is some more of the advice of Sufyan al-Thawri. Like, put this into your repertoire of the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. There is still the question, what does this have to do with the chapter title? And perhaps, maybe, because I don't see a direct connection, but perhaps, maybe, this is not as much about the reward, but some of the etiquette of how to call to the Sunnah. Because we said the chapter is about the reward of those who preserve, revive, and call to the Sunnah. And so perhaps the mentioning of these two narrations of Sufyan al-Thawri is about some of the etiquette of how to call. So if you want the reward of being a caller to the Sunnah, then maybe you might need to follow some of these etiquettes. Perhaps. But Allah knows best. I don't see a direct connection to the chapter title in these two narrations. The next narration he mentions, he says, أخبرنا الحسن بن عثمان قال حدثنا أحمد بن حمدان قال حدثنا أحمد بن الحسن قال حدثنا عبد الصمد قال سمعت الفضيل بن عياض يقول إن لله عبادة يحيي بهم البلاد وهم أصحاب السنة ومن كان يعقل ما يدخل جوفه من حله كان من حزب الله. Allahu Akbar. These statements, the ones that were before in this statement right now, Fudayl ibn Iyad, right? These are statements you hear people often saying, like, especially in the times of confusion. Well, what is the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnah? And when is a person from Ahl Sunnah? And what excludes a person from Ahl Sunnah? And, you know, especially when times are confusing and people start throwing these things around. And this perhaps strengthens the supposition that we made that these narrations are meant to talk about some of the etiquette of how to call and how to revive and to identify who is and who isn't. Al-Lalakai, he says that Al-Hasan ibn Uthman informed us. He said that Ahmad ibn Hamdan narrated to us. He said that Ahmad ibn al-Hasan narrated to us. He said that Abdul Samad narrated to us. He said that I heard Fudayl ibn Iyad, Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, Abid al-Haramain, the scholar known as Abid al-Haramain, the worshipper of the two harams. He was an individual, if you don't know, who used to be a highway robber. He used to be a criminal. And before he ever got caught, one time upon hearing an ayat from the Quran, that fear of Allah overtook him and he made tawbah. And he became a scholar, especially in character and how to behave and in worship and aestheticism. And he became known as the worshiper of the two harams because he would stay constantly in between Mecca and Medina, worshiping Allah in the two masajid. And he was a companion and a close friend of Abdullah ibn Mubarak, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, the scholar, the mujahid. And there is between the two of them a correspondence where they write to each other, like encouraging each other to try to do what the other one is doing to some extent. You see what I'm saying? Fudail encouraging him to like devote to like worshiping in the masjids, and Abdullah ibn Mubarak like encouraging him to get out, come do jihad, do interact, don't just spend your time strictly in the masjid, right? But there were two people of fadl, of righteousness. And Fudail ibn Iyad, he said, Inna lillahi ibadah. Indeed, Allah has certain slaves of his that he revives with them the land. He brings new life to the land because of these slaves. Through these slaves of his, he brings new life to the land. And they are the people of the Sunnah. And whoever knows or whoever thinks about what he enters into his belly, whether or not it's halal, then this individual is from the hizb of Allah. This individual is from the party of Allah. Right? This is his hizb. Fudail ibn Iyad, he said that indeed Allah has certain slaves of his. And this is the connection. Right? The people who revive the Sunnah, they get this quality and this moniker, this title of being considered true slaves of Allah. And we use that word on purpose. And we've talked about before, like, it's not something that we should be shying away from, calling us slaves of Allah, because this is who we are in reality. And perhaps if Allah makes it easy, we might even put some words together regarding this topic, because there are tons of statements from the Salaf, from the Prophet on down, that clarify that this word is understood as the word slave that we know about. But being a slave in and of itself is not disrespectful. And we shouldn't automatically default to the understanding of slavery the way Americans did it. But for us to be slaves of Allah is the highest status that we can achieve. And yes, a slave is a worshiper. And yes, these other words convey an idea or a meaning that is inherent in this word, slavery. But the best and the most applicable translation, and even slavery is not the best English word, right? When we talk about its etymology and where it comes from the Slavs who were slaves, and so they use the word slavery, like slave referring to them. But what it means is to be low and to be humbled and to be beneath and to be subject, right? And this is what it is. And this is what we are. We are subjects of Allah. In any circumstance, he says, indeed, there are certain slaves that are for Allah. They belong to Allah, showing this pure connection, this relationship that has no intermediaries or middlemen. And this, like this, they have a level above. There are certain slaves of Allah that he uses them to give new life to the lands. Allah revives and brings life to these dead and barren lands. And these dead and barren lands are not dead and barren of vegetation or even occupants and inhabitants, but they are dead and barren from the Sunnah. And this is what we see often, because the people of Sunnah are few and they're strange. And so we see that when we go to the masajid, when we go to the madaris, the schools and things like that, we see that the people of Sunnah are few. And so there are certain slaves that Allah uses of his to revive these lands, to bring back the Sunnah to these places. And the people that he uses, they are known as Ahl Sunnah or Ashab Sunnah. Wahum Ashab Sunnah. These people that Allah renews the lands with are the people of the Sunnah. And he mentions some of their qualities. He says, وَمَنْ كَانَ يَعْقِلُ مَا يَدْخُلُ جَوْفَهُ مِنْ حِلِّهِ. And those people who know what they're putting into their insides, مِنْ حِلِّهِ, yani from the sources or from the halal places that they got it from. Meaning they're conscious of what they eat, its origins. Is it halal, what they're consuming? And this was a big issue with the Salaf. being conscious of the source of what you consume, i.e., its permissibility. And there are so many statements, none of them I can think of right now. My memory is weak, but there's so many statements about the Salaf that equate good eating, like eating that which is halal, consuming that which is halal, to one of the most important pillars of the religion. And so Fudayl is, commenting on this fact that people of the Sunnah and those who are conscious of what they enter into their insides from where it came, then this group, these people, are the Hizb of Allah. They are the Hizb of Allah. He says, وأخبرنا أحمد قال حدثنا محمد قال حدثنا أحمد بن الزهير قال حدثني بعض أصحابنا قال أبو صالح يعني الفراء قال عطاؤنا الخفاف كنت عند الأوزاعي وأراد أن يكتب إلى أبي إسحاق الفزاري فقال للكاتب اكتب وابدأ به فإنه والله خير مني. قال أبو صالح لقيت فضيل بن عياض فعزاني بأبي إسحاق وقال لربما اشتقت إلى المصيصة وما بفضل الرباط إلا أرى أبا إسحاق. قال ابن خيثمة هذه أحاديث كلها عن صاحب لنا بالبصرة يقال له محمد بن هارون أبو نشيط. نعم. He says that Ahmed informed us. He said that Muhammad narrated to us. He said that Ahmed ibn Zuhair narrated to us. Ahmed ibn Zuhair ibn Abi Khaythama. He said that some of our companions informed me. They said that Abu Salih, يعني al-Farra, Abu Salih al-Farra, he said that Ata al-Khaffaf said, I was with al-Awza'i, Abdul Rahman ibn Amr al-Awza'i, the famous scholar from Ash-Sham. And he wanted to write to Abi Ishaq al-Fazari. Abi Ishaq al-Fazari was another famous scholar from the people of Ash-Sham. We talked about him previously. And so al-Awza'i, he said to Ata al-Khaffaf, or he said to the writer, the scribe who was going to transcribe the letter that he wanted written, he said, write this to him, but start with his name, right? Mention his name first, right? So like when we think about how we write letters in English, at the top we write from, and at the bottom we write the recipient, to. He said, no, start with his name, right? Put to, if you will, at the top of the letter, and then the bottom put from. Let the first thing that is addressed be his name, right? Like, for example, Sulaiman, he started off his letter with who it was from. إِنَّهُ مِن سُلَيْمَانَ وَإِنَّهُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ, right? من محمد بن عبد الله من محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى هرقل عظيم الروم. From Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, to Heraclius, the Caesar of Rome. But al-Awza'i, he said, no, start with his name, right? To Abi Ishaq, from al-Awza'i. He said, because wallahi, he's better than I am. Like this, they used to pay even close detail about how they would address each other in the subtlest of ways. They didn't have the arrogance, the animosity, the enmity for each other that sometimes we see. No, write his name first. To Abi Ishaq, from al-Awza'i, so that he would know that his name, I even think his name is better than mine, because he's better than me. So I want to mention the best things first. And like this, the Salaf would be detailed in their etiquette. These are lessons in etiquette that we can learn from. So he said, write to him and begin with his name, because wallahi, he's better than me. Abu Salih al-Farra, yani, he said, and I met Fudayl ibn Iyad, and he condoled me. He gave me the condolences, i.e. for the death of Abi Ishaq. Right? When Abu Salih met Fudayl ibn Iyad, he consoled him. Yeah, mashallah, I heard Abu Ishaq pass, man. SubhanAllah, may Allah have mercy on y'all. May Allah make y'all situation easy. Fa'azzani bi Abi Ishaq. He consoled me regarding the death of Abi Ishaq. And he said, this is the statement of Fudayl, maybe I would even want to travel to Al-Misisa. Al-Misisa, we said that was that city in Turkey on the Muslim front lines, the borderlands where they were doing jihad. He said, sometimes I used to want to go to Misisa. And remember, we said Fudayl ibn Iyad, he used to stay in Mecca and Medina. He said, sometimes I would get the urge to even just go to Misisa. Not for the sake of doing any borderland protection, border patrol, right? Not for doing the sake of any border patrol and jihad. The Muslims would stay on the front lines and guard the Muslim borders. They call this ribat. He said, and I didn't have any desire to do border patrol, right? I would want to go to Misisa, but I wouldn't want to be going for the sake of doing border patrol. I would have no other desire except to see Abu Ishaq. The only reason I would want to go is because I would want to see Abu Ishaq. And like we said, looking at the person of the Sunnah, calling to the Sunnah is an act of worship. Fudayl ibn Iyad would want to go just to visit his friend. I don't have no desire except I just miss him. Ibn Abi Khaythama, this is what it should be, Allah knows best. Call Ibn Khaythama, right? Attributing him to his, he said, the person who, he said that these narrations, all of them, are from a companion of ours who used to live in Basra. He was known as Muhammad ibn Harun Abu Nashiq. We'll take two more and we'll stop. He says, أخبرنا الشيخ أبو حامد أحمد بن أبي طاهر الفقيه or الفقيه رحمه الله Abu Hamid al-Isfarayini, a major scholar. He said, أنبأنا عمر بن أحمد بن علي قال حدثنا أبو عبيد بن حربوية الفقيه قال حدثنا زكريا بن يحيى بن صبيح ابن عمر بن حسين ابن حميد ابن منهب قال سمعت أبا بكر بن عياش قال له رجل يا أبا بكر من السني قال الذي إذا ذكرت الأهواء لم يتعصب لشيء منها. Subhanallah. Remember, we said that the relationship between these narrations is about some of the etiquette of how to call and how to revive, and then talking about how to identify, right? Is he Salafi? Is he not Salafi? How do I know, right? Understanding what some of these fundamentals are. He says that Sheikh Abu Hamid Ahmed ibn Abi Tahir al-Faqih informed us, may Allah have mercy on him. He said that Umar ibn Ahmed ibn Ali informed us. He said that Abu Ubaid ibn Harbuya al-Faqih narrated to us. He said that Zakaria ibn Yahya ibn Subay ibn Umar ibn Hussein ibn Humayd ibn Munhib narrated to us. He said that I heard Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash, right? Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash from the scholars of the Atba' al-Tabi'een. Now, he said that Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash, he said to a man, a man said to him, "Oh Abu Bakr, how do I know if somebody is Sunni? How do I know if this person is a Sunni Muslim? Right? What am I looking for? How do I know if this person is Salafi? How do I know if this person is from Ahl Sunnah?" Abu Bakr, he said to him, he is the one, when any of the desires are mentioned, you don't find him clinging to any of them. That's the line. That's the criteria. When the desires are mentioned, you don't find him clinging to any of them. He doesn't defend any of them. He doesn't try to justify any of them. When somebody points out that, ya akhi, hadha min al-ahwa, hadha min al-bid'ah, you don't see him defending it, right? Blindly adopting it, showing partisanship to it. They understand that our position is the haq, wherever it is. And so like this, you can identify the person, not just by the result, but by the methodology. They are not clean. They don't go overboard. You've met people before who sometimes they have an opinion and then they try to bend everything to their opinion. How do I know the person is Sunni? When the desires are mentioned, when somebody says this is from ahwa, this is from bid'ah, and it's clarified and shown, you don't find them trying to defend the bid'ah. They don't try to defend the mistake. They acknowledge it. This is an important quality of the people of the Sunnah. A benefit here, I don't know why I wrote this though. Sima ahlul hadith awla min qiyasi ahlul lugha. Oh, because of harbuya. Maybe. The way things were heard by the people of hadith are more suitable to be adopted than the analogies that are mentioned by the people of language. And so maybe I wrote that because of harbuya instead of harbaway. The last narration, he says, أخبرنا علي بن محمد بن إبراهيم الجوهري بترسوس أو بترسوس أو ترسوس. No, ترسوس بالفتح. He said حدثنا أحمد بن سلمان قال حدثني عبد الله بن جابر الترسوسي قال حدثنا جعفر بن عبد الواحد قال لنا أبو صالح الفراء عن سهل بن محمود ختن أبي بكر بن عياش قال سمعت أبا بكر بن عياش يقول السنة في الإسلام أعز من الإسلام في سائر الأديان. الله أكبر. He says that Ali ibn Muhammad informed us, Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Jawhari informed us in the city of Tarsus, which we said was one of those cities in Anadolu, or modern day Turkey. He said that Ahmed ibn Salman narrated to us. He said that Abdullah ibn Jabir al-Tarasusi narrated to me. He said that Ja'far ibn Abdul Wahid narrated to us. He said that Abu Salih al-Farra said to us on the authority of Sahal ibn Mahmud, the son-in-law of Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash, the same narrator. He said that I heard Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash saying, the Sunnah in Islam is harder to find than Islam from amongst the rest of the religions. That is an important statement. That is an important statement. نسأل الله أن نكون من الأقلاء الغرباء أهل السنة والجماعة. Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash, he said that finding somebody on the Sunnah, finding the correct application of the Sunnah, the correct aqidah, the correct way of applying this religion amongst the Muslims, amongst the people who practice Islam, is more difficult than finding somebody attributing to Islam amongst the rest of the religions. And this was said during the time of the who? The Tabi'een, the Atba' Tabi'een. So Islam at that point in time hadn't reached the level of being 1 out of every 5, 1.5 out of every 5, 2 out of every 5 people. Nowadays, the Muslims number in the billions. Right? There's 7 billion people on earth. There's over 1 billion, close to 2 billion of them are Muslim, or they attribute to Islam. But finding the Sunnah amongst the general theme of Islam is more difficult than finding the general theme of Islam compared to the rest of the religions. That just shows us that Islam as a whole, compared to the rest of the people, are low in number. And the people on the Sunnah from amongst the Muslims are less in number comparatively than Islam is to the rest of the religions. And so this shows us that a couple of things, right? And I won't take you too much longer. We're running out of time. But it shows us that, one, it's not the people of the Sunnah who separated us, right? Often you hear people make this statement, well, the people that are on the Sunnah, the Salafi, they separate the communities. They constantly cause, no, the people are separate. It's the people on the Sunnah who are the few who are still upon Islam the way that it was. The others have left where we were. We didn't separate. We didn't kick them out, nor should we be kicking them out. It's them who, by their actions, separated themselves from us. But it's us, by our actions, who are constantly calling them back and inviting them back and trying to revive the Sunnah. Because the Sunnah amongst the Muslims is less than Islam amongst the rest of the religions. And so it shows us the importance of us working hard and working together, because we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We'll stop at that amount. We're at narration 50 in this first chapter. And alhamdulillah, next lesson, next reading should be the end of this chapter. There's only about 7 more narrations in this chapter. So we'll try to close it out next time. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وإياكم. آمين وإياكم. آمين وإياكم. آمين وإياكم. آمين وإياكم. أحبك الذي أحببتنا فيه. Meaning, what do you mean about a person who puts from in his stomach from that which is halal? Meaning, knowing the sources, was the food that you consumed, was the way that you got it halal? And was it itself halal? Right? So not only does the food have to be halal, you can't eat pork, you can't drink alcohol, but also the permissible items that you eat, did you obtain them in a halal way? Did you avoid riba? Did you avoid theft? Did you avoid crime to accomplish those things? And if not, then this is one of the major things that affect the person's Islam and can cause difficulty for the person in their Islam. And you don't have to go much further. Like I said, I couldn't remember some of the statements of the Salaf that like directly talk about some of the importance about the what you eat and where you get it from. But there is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that's much clearer and comprehensive in it. ثم ذكر رجل أشعث وأغبر يمد يطيل السفر يمد يديه إلى السماء يقول يا رب يا رب ومطعمه حرام وملبسه حرام ومشربه حرام وغذي بالحرام فأنى يستجاب له. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, talking about how a man who could be disheveled and dirty, like dusty, on a long trip, stretching his hands out to make dua, calling and saying, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. And all of these are qualities that by themselves get one's dua answered. They're means that an individual can use in making dua. So how about if they're all gathered together? The individual has all of these qualities, but what he eats is haram, and what he drinks is haram, and what he wears is haram, and his nourishment is haram. The Prophet says, so how could his dua get answered? And so it shows us that from the most important fundamentals of the Salaf is obtaining their provisions from halal sources and only consuming that which is halal. And this is something that often you find that the enemies of Islam, they work to remove our ability to do this. And lillahi dur, to Allah belongs the milk of those individuals, even if we disagreed with them in their position, like our Sheikh Farid, rahimahullah ta'ala, who used to not eat the food of the people in the West. And it goes to show, right? You look at a person like that and the what we think about him, and Allah is his reckoning. We don't praise anybody in front of Allah, but what we think about him from his righteousness and his steadfastness and his the way he approached the dunya, and you see that an individual who kind of abstains from these haram sources and puts a barrier between him and them, the way Allah writes the acceptance of that person in the hearts of the people. Rahimahullahu rahmatan wasi'ah. I mean, does eating halal have a positive effect on your body? Absolutely. I don't know the best bookstore to order from. A faqih is a scholar of Islamic law, one who is capable of answering questions of Islamic jurisprudence, and it has rules and qualifications. If you look in the books of usul al-fiqh, they talk about it in the end of the books of usul al-fiqh when they talk about a mujtahid and a muqallid, and this enters into the conversation of a faqih as well. The Sunni is not the one who clings to either or. No, the Sunni is the one who clings to the Sunnah. I don't know what either or is, but تمسكوا بها وعضوا عليها بالنواجذ. The Sunni is the one, like the Prophet ﷺ, he said, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِسُنَّتِي, then upon you is my sunnah, and the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashidin al-Mahdiyyin min ba'di, تمسكوا بها وعضوا عليها بالنواجذ وإياكم ومحدثات الأمور فإن كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار, أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم في حديث Irbad, that famous hadith of Irbad ibn Sariya, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, advising the Sahaba after giving them what seemed to be a farewell speech that was extremely effective, he said, so upon you is my sunnah and the sunnah of my rightly guided successors. Hold on tight to it and bite down on it with your molar teeth. So I don't know that the Sunni is not the one who clings to either or. Instead, the Sunni is the one who clings to the sunnah and rejects anything other than that. Wafikum barakallah. Ameen wa yakum. Ameen wa yakum. And avoiding that which is doubtful also. Now, إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات ما يعرفه كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات فقد استبرأ لدينه وعرضه. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Nu'man, whoever avoids the doubtful matters, then he has freed himself of any fault in his religion, as well as فقد استبرأ لدينه as well as his honor. Now, so not just, and there's another hadith that it says a person won't reach any true piety until he leaves off the halal makhafat al-haram, until he leaves off something that might even be permissible out of the fear that it might be impermissible. على كل حال نسأل الله يتوب علينا ويغفر لنا وأن يدخلنا الجنة وأن يرزقنا النظر إلى وجهه الكريم وأن يغفر لنا ويرحمنا وأن لا يعذبنا وأن لا يفتننا في الدنيا ولا في الآخرة. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Of course not, يا أخي. Nor did I think that about you. Like I said, it's just the statement was unclear, and so we decided to comment on it that way. But if not, we think much higher of you than to think that you meant it in any ill way. فجزاكم الله خيرا وبارك فيكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.